Today I'm going to be doing a colored pencil demonstration of a landscape. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. Those of you who joined me for last Wednesday's live stream saw me complete the clouds in colored pencil on this piece. If you missed that, I'll have a card pop up here so you can check that out. Today, we're going to take a look at the entire piece. All of the supplies that I've used are listed below in the video description if you want to check that out. If you are supporters over on Patreon, the 1-hour version of this tutorial is available for you now, complete with voiceover, so make sure to head over and check that out. For this demonstration, I am working on Canon Mi-Teintes. This is the light blue 98-pound pastel paper. I'm working on the smooth side. This has a smooth and a more rough side. I don't think the rough side is going to be suitable for colored pencil, so definitely check which side you're working on before you get started. The thing that I'm liking so much about this paper is I don't have to work in the nice little clean circles to make sure I get the pigment into all the little crevices of the paper. I'm working with a very light hand, but the paper is picking up so much pigment that when I blend it out with the paint thinner, like you're seeing there, it just comes out so smooth. I think it's going to work really, really well for blurry backgrounds. I think it'll work well for portraits too. Now, when I do use the odorless mineral spirits, you can see that it got super, super dark. The paper just completely turns to dark gray. It will lighten back up, so don't let it freak you out. Your colors are going to go back to where they're supposed to be as it dries. I do make sure that it dries completely before going on to my next layer. Now for this piece, it is a very, very small piece. It's 5x7, much smaller than I typically work. So I'm not really focused on tiny details. My concern is getting my colors, my values, my contrast all where it needs to be. So for this first section, I'm blocking everything in about where it's going to need to be, but I'm going to come back and add more details and correct my color and values later after I get the water in. Right now it seems like I'm really, really dark, but once I get the darker water in next to it, it makes it more obvious where I can go darker on this portion of the landscape. I am putting hints of grass, but I'm not putting all of the blades of grass in here, again, because it is very small. I'm pulling a lot of blue into the shaded areas of the rocks just because that's going to be where the water is reflecting up onto those. See, I'm using a little bit of this kind of tan orangey color in with the grass because this is supposed to be a fall scene and I don't want it to look too bright green because that would feel too much like spring. Onto the water, I've blocked in where my rocks are going to go, and I'm using several shades of blue. That is very, very important here. In order to make the water look realistic, I've got to use a lot of different blues. It's not a matter of find the perfect color and just fill it in solid. It would look too flat. So I'm mixing a lot of light blues. I'm mixing some that are warm, some that are cooler where they're closer to purple on the color wheel. I've got a lot of various blues in here. Any of these little ripples, these little brush strokes or pencil strokes that I'm making now, they are all completely horizontal. Even though my water is moving down at a diagonal, I have to keep my lines parallel to the horizontal line of the paper, because if you start to follow the curve or that diagonal line, it'll feel like your water is lopsided. So I've got to make sure that any of those pencil strokes are going very, very horizontal, any of the actual lines, like the water ripples that you're seeing in there. And just like everything else, I'm blending it out with odorless mineral spirits and then letting it dry in between layers. Now I'm coming on top with the white luminance. Look how well this stands out. I'm finding that the whites, just because this paper has a nice amount of tooth, it's smooth, but still enough tooth for the pencil to grip to. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm really liking it. And again, it lets me be very sloppy and very messy because I'm not having to work in those little circles that I normally do to get the smooth texture. I tried using the white Pablo pencil by Caran d'Ache to get smaller details with the white, but it just doesn't show up as well, so I kept going back to my luminance white. Right now, I'm not totally in love with a few Pablos that I've used, but I've only used a couple, so I can't really judge that well yet. I'll probably eventually do a review on those. So moving on to the next section of grass. Now on my reference photo, this had a ton of rocks and little pebbles, but I didn't want that much detail in the background, so I'm keeping it very, very simple. I'm putting in a few rocks, so there is some interesting texture back there, but I don't need every little teeny tiny pebble. Again, this is just very small, and I don't want to draw attention to that area too much. For this section, I'm also pulling a lot of these oranges and tans into the grass so that I don't end up with what looks like spring grass. The spring grass, you're typically going to use brighter lime colors. They have that kind of glow to it. When you move into fall, you get a lot more of that dead grass, so I've got to pull in those tans, those neutral colors. The same thing with the mountains. I'm using a lot of these reddish brown tones. You can see I'm being so sloppy here, so much more so than I normally would be because my pencil strokes aren't going to show. You can blend them out completely wherever you need to. I've got to make sure that I've got different tones in these mountains. If I try to make them all one color, they would all blend in with each other. So you can see I've gotten lighter and lighter as I move back. Pull some highlights on there. Every time I want to get highlights over a darker color, that's where you're going to see me switch to my wax-based pencil, the Luminance. And when you work small, just as a warning, it's something that's going to look really good from a distance or when you look at it in person. I don't like how this looks when I see it larger on screen. When you blow something up, it's not going to look better. It looks better when you shrink things down. So that's something to keep in mind if you do work small. But it was such good practice for focusing on values and just contrast and that sort of thing. Now for these clouds, this I'm moving on really quickly because I do have the live stream where you can watch this being done in real time. I'll have a card pop up so you can check that out. But I'm just the same thing as everything else, blocking in where my lights and darks are going to go, blending that out with a paint thinner. You can see it gets super, super dark. Once that dries, I can go back over, adding my highlights again. Now, one thing to notice when I draw clouds, I'm keeping the upper section of the clouds brighter than the bottom section. The upper section is also going to be more harsh as far as that contrast between the background sky and the line. It's a very defined white line, the shapes that I'm creating on the upper section. It gets much, much softer as I move down into the shadowed portions of each cloud. You can see, again, being very, very messy with those pencils. I'm even holding the pencils sideways sometimes to block in color, but it all blended out completely smooth. I've got to let it dry in between layers or I will damage the tooth of the paper, so you don't want to work your pencil over an area that's wet from the odorless mineral spirits. And I'm just going to keep layering like this until I get it how I want. Now, towards the end, once I got all of this blocked in, I came back through with the touch-up texture and titanium white from brushandpencil.com. I mixed those two products together. I'll have a card pop up so you can see exactly how I mixed those. But I came back through with those and a paintbrush, and I was able to paint on some really bright highlights that just made those portions pop out at you even more. Right now, just still getting that layer, that base layer in for these. Gotta blend that out, and with each additional layer with the odorless mineral spirits, I use less and less of the paint thinner on the brush, because if you have too much, you'll just lift the previous color when you've got a lot of pigment on the paper. So as I move on, there's less, but here you can see I'm just dotting in the little sparkles in the water, some highlights on the flowers that were in the foreground, and I'm also going to do a little bit of detailing with the clouds. The nice thing with this is if you go too dark with the, or too bright with the touch-up texture titanium white mixture, like I do on some of this, you can go back over it with your pencils to soften things down or tint the color. So where I put the little lines for the grass in the foreground, that's too bright, but I had to get it that light in order to be able to come on top with the yellows and tan colors so that that would stand out. The yellows and tans on their own were not standing out enough for my grass. So I was able to put in the little brush strokes and then come on top of that with the color that I really wanted. But there is my finished little project. This is a great one if you are new to colored pencil or really any medium. Landscapes are kind of a nice thing to go with because you're not as worried about every detail being perfect. If my rock is not in the right place or the water is moving a little wrong, no one's really going to know the difference if your mountains are shaped wrong. So you're not having to focus so much on your drawing as you are your blending and your values and your contrast and those things. So if that's what you really want to focus on, and not worry about your drawing, landscapes are a really, really fun way to go. Plus, they're pretty anyway. But I can definitely say I am really liking this Canson Mi-Teintes paper. It's fairly inexpensive. It is lighter weight, so it can be a little bit flimsy. It's only 98 pounds. You have to be careful when you tape it. Use a very low tack tape. I would not use my regular masking tape. It will rip this paper like crazy, but I like the texture. I like how the colored pencil sticks to it, and then I can be sloppy and messy and it still blends out smoothly. I'll have to do a portrait on this and another one with a blurry background for you guys because I think that this paper is going to work great for those. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are supporters over on Patreon, the longer version of this tutorial is available for you now, complete with voiceover, so make sure to head over and check that out. If you're new to my channel, I have new videos 4 times a week, plus now I'm doing live streams, so I would love if you subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. And you can follow me on all of my social media sites. The links are below in the video description to keep up with news, my newest work, and be notified of when my live streams are coming. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bet a few of you asking where my studio assistants were lately. Studio assistant number 1 happens to be in my studio right now. Her tail is wagging. It's hitting me in the back. Are you happy? Oh, your breath is bad. I think I need to brush your teeth. That was terrible. Please don't do that again.